If you want to go to any place that is haunted, just go to the small city of Savannah, Georgia. It's teeming with haunted life. You can't escape it when you're there. Every square inch of that city is haunted. And it makes sense, since it's one of the oldest towns in the United States. The locals would knowingly live side by side with these spirits as if they're residents, nonchalantly. I once saw an object move on its own next to a cashier, and he just casually moved it back and said, "Hey, ghost of Kevin, stop moving my stuff already." The city even thrives off of its paranormal attraction with bus and nightly tours. I went to college there as a hard skeptic, to come out as a total believer. Fun fact, my first dorm was formerly a coffin factory. That's how weirdly macabre this little city can be. I had many ghost stories from that city in my 4 years there, but I'll tell one of them that still gives me the creeps to this day. One night in my dorm, I woke up around 2 a.m. and I needed to use the bathroom. As I went out across the hall to go, I saw someone at the corner of my eye coming out from their room and started walking towards the other bathroom on that side. I didn't think much of it and thought it was my dorm mate who just happened to go at the same time. She tends to stay up really late to finish assignments anyhow. I did my business and started to walk back only to see her walking back like me. I turned to look and wave at her, but stopped dead in my tracks. And so did this person. This girl wasn't my dorm mate. She had red hair, pale features, and she was wearing this large t-shirt that covers her down to her knees. What's extremely eerie was the fact she stopped at the same time when I turned to look at her. But she wasn't looking at me. She was looking right towards the room where my dorm mate would be. I started to wonder if the door leading to the bathroom had opened to begin with. I got tense and quickly went into my room to shut the door and lock it. It took me a moment and I decided it was just late night fogs, and I imagined it, or it was a friend of hers. A peculiar friend she has. However, my door started to violently shake. Someone was trying to open the door in a hurry. I was startled and I called out to my dorm mate if that was her. No answer. I decided to open the door to see that no one was there. I felt freaked out, of course, but I just wanted to think it was just my mind playing tricks with me, them playing a prank, or I was just fatigued. I eventually went back to sleep, but I was awoken again by something unknown. I felt something wasn't right. I was about to turn my lamp back on until I saw something at the corner of my eye again, and it was in front of my door in my room. Obviously, I was scared now, and I thought it was a good idea to look right at where I supposedly saw someone, and I did. It was the same girl, staring at me, and she had these terrifying, sad, pit-black eyes. I yelled in shock and switched on the lamp to find her gone right after. It wasn't long until my dorm mate in my hall came out and asked if I was okay. I was confident enough to tell her what I saw, but she didn't know what to think. I couldn't go back to sleep that night. Later, I decided to ask my dorm mate across the hall about what happened. When I described it to her, she immediately froze, and she looked a little scared herself. She told me I saw her too. To be honest, I did some research on my own time about any significant hauntings in our dorms. I found a case where a female student committed suicide in my room where I stay in. Sadly, there are cases of students committing suicide notoriously so every year attending this college. To this day, it makes the hairs from the back of my head stand just thinking about it. But I do hope that this spirit finds peace. This happened when I was in college studying nursing, way back 2007 or 2008. It was my third year on the course, and this was when I was staying in the Philippines. This story happened when we were having our psychiatric affiliation with Vicente Soto Memorial Hospital in Cebu City. For those who may have been familiar with the place, I asked that if you can tell me more about the dormitory that we stayed there. It's a dormitory that is near the hospital and the psych wards. I am not from Cebu, so I have no idea of the history of the place. So knowing if it is really haunted would really give me peace of mind, as I've witnessed some weird and scary stuff happening during our stay there. We arrived at that said dormitory. As I recall, it was almost dusk and evening was fast approaching. The first impression when we entered the place was the darkness all over the place. Even with the lights on, it felt a little bit darker for me at that time. Be it physically or metaphorically, that was how I remember it initially upon stepping foot on the place. Next thing I noticed was how the dormitory was shaped. It was circular, and there are stairs that lead to the second floor where the rooms are. There were columns supporting the circular dormitory, which, to me, if I imagine drawing lines, I can probably imagine making a pentagram from the circular formations of the columns. My memory might be mixed with imagination that time, but that is how it felt like and how I perceived it to be. That being said, you can only imagine the weird vibes the dormitory is putting off. Boys and girls are separated by their own rooms. One room can occupy almost 10 people. It has double decks arranged as if like a military barracks. That's the best I can describe it with. We arrived at our boys' room, and the first thing I noticed was we have a balcony at the very back of the room where we can do laundry and stuff. How cool was that? Was what I originally thought, but that changed immediately when I stepped out to the balcony alone. Right outside of the balcony has this huge acacia tree, and right that instant I felt like I was being watched, and I had these goosebumps all over my skin. I shrugged it off and went inside the boys' room, bearing in mind not to go out there if alone. We stayed there for 2 weeks, so on our first few days of our stay, some weird things have been already happening. I already knew that there was something off with the place, but I didn't tell anyone, as it was unnecessary to make my classmates get scared, just because I felt like the place is off and weird. That didn't last long, though, as they experienced hauntings all on their own. Experience 1. I have this girl classmate that lost her phone. She swore she just placed it on her bed, and she couldn't find it anywhere. We originally thought someone must have took it, logically thinking that was possible. We tried to call her phone, and someone answered it after a few rings. All I know was that it was an old lady voice at the other end of the line, per my classmate's description of the voice as we were waiting for their conversations to start. My classmate kept on saying hello, and if the lady took her phone, but we can see that she was getting confused and stressed, talking to the stranger. She abruptly hung up the phone, and we were baffled as to why, so we asked her what happened, and where's her phone. She was shaking and scared. I can tell something spooked her out from that phone call. She said the old lady was talking in Bisaya, a dialect from Cebu, something about how pretty she was and she likes her hair. I can't speak Bisaya, but that was roughly what my classmate said. What made her creeped out about the whole thing was that it was as if the old lady knew her or had been watching her to say that she likes her hair. It was just unnerving. We shrugged it off as probably a prank caller. We were all at the hallway at this time, since boys are not allowed on the girls' room. That same moment, when my classmate decided to go back to the girls' room, she freaked out, and guess where was her phone? It was on her bed, same place where she said she placed it in the first place. Experience 2. We have at that time a vacant room where there are double decks, same as our rooms, but no one occupies that room. My classmates and I decided to stay there and hang out rather than staying in the hallway all the time. The girls decided to talk about stuff, probably their crushes, I don't know. I was minding my own business, laying on one of the empty beds. I was using my phone to pass the time, since we're not doing anything yet, when I heard a commotion on the other side of the room. The girls were yelling and running towards the door and out of the room. Of course, I went after them, along with some of the boys that were also hanging out in there, to see what was going on. My girl classmates were so freaked out, some of them were crying as they relay what happened. They were of course just doing girls' stuff and gossiping at the far end of the room, when one of them decided to record their convos with their cell phone just for fun, they said. Nothing out of the ordinary happened while they were talking, but when they played the conversations on the phone, we all can hear it. There was no mistake. There was another voice in the background, and at first it was so faint in sound, but as it progresses we can hear it. It was a girl, not an old lady, but a young girl's voice, singing. I can't understand what she was singing, but I can tell it was a Bisaya song, almost like an old tuned song. We were all freaked out. The girl even managed to throw the phone away as if it was haunted or something. Experience 3. This is by far the scariest I have experienced while staying there. This happened when we were all sleeping during the night, and a few days after all the creepy stuff's going on that time. I remember I was on the top bunk/bed. Lights were dimmed already, and all of my classmates were asleep. I felt this hair-raising sensation as if someone is staring at you from the darkness. I was facing the backside of the room, where the balcony door was leading to the huge acacia tree outside. A few moments later, my sensation of dread just intensified, and I noticed a shadowy figure forming at the very end of the room by the balcony door. I was petrified, unable to move at what I was witnessing. I am fully awake as I watched this entity in the shape of a female with ragged hair, and though not much features of the face I can tell, but the eyes were red and almost malevolent. I can tell it was looking at my classmates as if searching for something, but at that instant I felt like it knew I was awake and watching it. And at just that instant, when I blinked my eye, she was right in front of my bed and staring malevolently at me. Scared and horrified was an understatement as far as I can say. I can feel my heart pounding, and all my hairs at the back of my neck and arms are standing up. Although I was scared, I held my cross necklace that I was wearing that time and spoke to it. In the name of Jesus Christ, umalis ka dito, hindi ka namin ginagambala. In the name of Jesus Christ, leave us be, we are not doing anything to you. At that instant, it vanished, just like that. The next day, a classmate of mine asked me, why was I talking alone last night? I just didn't tell him about what I saw so no one will freak out more as they already were. Suffice to say, that was one of the most memorable moments while staying on that dorm. In 2009, I was living the summer in Best Hall at Eastern Michigan University in Ypsilanti, Michigan. This hall has no air conditioning at all, and we were only allowed to use fans for our dorms. When I got there, I noticed immediately something was in there. The temperature was drastically colder, nearly freezing when it was 80-some degrees that day. In fact, that summer was between 80 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, and there is no logical explanation for the temperature to be so cool when it's a hot, old building. My room was at the end of the hall on the 4th floor by a lounge-ish kind of room. So I don't remember the small things besides having conversations with it because I knew it was there, and in some way I could tell he was listening. Though I probably looked crazy to my roommate until she saw some stuff too. I remember clearly one night me and my roommate got ready for sleep. It was around midnight, and it sounded like books were being thrown on the ground, and I just laid in shock because there was nothing that had dropped. And then the biggest shock was over my head, was 2 lights that looked like 2 headlights, but made no logical sense. We are on the 4th floor, and there is no traffic whatsoever that time of night. Even if there was a lone car, it wouldn't shine through the window directly on the wall full bright. It scared the hell out of me and her, which now I am thinking it may have been orbs, but why would there be 2 perfect ones that looks like headlights at a close distance? The final thing that happened, that was more or less the last time I ever slept with the lights off, and happened in the morning. I remember falling asleep because I had to get up at 6 a.m. to get ready for the day, and I had a dream, and I saw the man in the room on my bed, and he just seemed like an older gentleman. And then I remember him leaving the dream, and then I heard a really, really loud beeping sound like a fire alarm. I knew the dorm was having a fire drill test, so I assumed that was what it was, and I instantly woke up and looked in the corner where the fire drill wasn't at all, because fire alarms are in center of ceiling in all rooms. And in the corner it was beeping, and an orb that was dense was flashing really bright, and then I was like, holy shit, because I am still thinking it is a fire drill, and fall out of bed trying to get my glasses, which are now somehow far under my bed. So I climbed to get them and crammed them on my face and looked back up, and the orb was gone, and my roommate was just laying there, and I was like, did you see that? And she said she hadn't. But it was so bright, and I know what I saw. I never ever slept with the lights off in the dorm after that. I never felt any harm was going to happen, but it just felt like a tense pressure sometimes walking into the room. And remember, the temp being cold? I brought heavy Afghans in summer because of it being so chilly. I left because we were moving, me and my family, and I remember being worried the spirit would attach and follow me, which it didn't because I haven't seen him since that dream. But I haven't sensed him anywhere near me now. I don't know, there is something about that specific room, and I wonder why he is there. I just really want to know what the white light was because it also was making noise, and I wonder if it was trying to communicate. It's been a while since my first story on this website, and I wanted to check it out after I and my friends were talking about ghosts. There's a lot to talk about, but I will probably only talk about this one moment at my university, UNAMAS, that has been sticking with me for a while. This happened a few months ago. Unlike my last story, it happened during the early hours on a Friday. I was busy doing some assignments that were supposed to be due yesterday, but I was pretty slow with it. The first months at university wasn't so easy, but I got used to it later on. Now, if I remembered correctly, it happened either late at 2 or just as soon as it hit 3. I was wearing my earphones drawing figurines and stuff when I heard a knock on the door. When I took my earphones off, there wasn't much of a sound. I thought it was just the flimsy table that's making the noise, so I decided to go back to work. But then it happened again, and this time I had my left earphone off, so I definitely had to double confirm. I looked at the door and then back at my papers when all of a sudden, the knocking happened again. This time, I had my full attention towards the door, and I wasn't doing anything that could possibly have made the noise. It was fast and aggressive, almost like they wanted me to get to the door. However, I was pretty spooked out to even move when I heard the knocking. Being afraid made me recite my prayers faster than a speeding bullet. I've heard of a lot of ghostly rumors at UNAMAS before I registered to my dorm, and most people were talking about the knocking, so when it happened to me, I was beyond afraid. I wasn't expecting the paranormal moment to hit me. It happened for a solid minute before the knocking eventually ceased. My scared butt wasn't brave enough to even reach the door, so I sat there on my seat and then towards my roommate, who was sound asleep. Like, dude, didn't even hear what happened. Took at least 30 minutes for me to settle down. I was too scared to even continue my assignment, so I decided to get straight to bed and finish my assignment hours later. Only explanation that I could probably think about that explains this very incident is that someone who I shared apartments with. In UNAMAS, we have this concept where students lived in apartment-style dorms. You know, with the living room and kitchen and everything. Must have been knocking the door for something, but gave up because they assumed I was asleep. I remembered one person who was awake with me at the time. But you won't imagine the look of horror I had on my face the moment he said that he didn't bother coming out of his room and was sound asleep, starting at 1, which is a whole hour before the knocking even started. Nobody was awake at the time too. I asked everyone. So yeah, ever since I've started to always be on guard whenever I go to my room without my roommate being there. Because of that incident, I've started to feel comfortable doing my assignments in the study room, just a few blocks away from my dorm. Recently, the college I attend has announced it will be demolishing the dorm I live in within the next year. The dorm building was first built in the 1960s. I live in a suite-style setup where 6 total girls share a living area but have separate rooms. A couple days after the announcement was made, we started experiencing weird activities within our rooms and the suite. The first event was when my roommate woke up with unexplained scratches on her body. She woke up with scratches on her hands, but she is certain they are not self-inflicted due to her nail condition. She had acrylic nails and is positive she could not scratch herself in her sleep with them. The next event happened the next day at around 1 p.m. There were about 4 girls sitting in the suite area. We have a futon and chairs. We have a shelf in this living room area that has a welcome sign along with other knickknacks. The window was not open, and we were all sitting down chatting. One of our friends began to speak, and the welcome sign, along with a few other items, were thrown onto the floor. The main welcome sign was surrounded in a wooden frame, but when we went to pick it up, the frame was broken into pieces. We rearranged the shelf with the items again and went about our business. One of our suite mates complained of waking up in the middle of the night to the feeling of someone in bed with her. However, she lives in a single. When she would roll over, she would find no one was there. The third incident happened was when I was back from one of my classes, alone. It was about noon and I was sitting at my desk working on some homework. I heard a loud clap come from the suite, and when I walked out, those same items had been knocked on the ground again. I put them back up, and here is where we all started to get suspicious. Later that evening, we were out in the suite again, messing around at about 10:30 p.m. One of our friends began posing for Snapchat pictures, and she went to post one of them and noticed an orb-like figure next to her leg. The most recent event happened this morning, March 2nd, 2018, at about 12:10 a.m. I had gotten into bed and began falling asleep. At this point, I was just barely awake, but I began to hear shuffling around and thought it was just my roommate or someone else. The shuffling was enough to wake me completely. It sounded as though something was in my closet messing with my clothing. It then turned to a scraping noise on the closet door. I was so scared, I couldn't move. We all think this is extremely weird, but don't know what to think of it. We had told some friends of ours about what was going on, but people mostly laughed it off. Any suggestions on how to handle the problem would be greatly appreciated. To give a little background, I'm originally from Canada. However, I went to a college in Texas for a scholarship. We all know the state of Texas is very religious, and I'm not at all. This will play into affect later. A bunch of my teammates and I decided to mess around with a Ouija board. One of the girls said she used to do it all the time and there wasn't any harm in it. So we decided to go to a graveyard that wasn't too far from us. Yes, I know. A Ouija board and a graveyard. Excellent choice. We set everything up, the Ouija board and candles. The night was very warm and no wind. We all placed our hands on the planchette and started asking questions. We probably asked about 10 questions and nothing was happening. So one of the girls started saying, "This is BS and it's all fake, etc." As soon as she finished saying that, the board started moving and spelling "get out." And suddenly the candles all blew out. I don't think we have all moved as fast as we did that night to get out of there. 2 days after that night, I started waking up around 3:30 a.m. When I would wake up, I could see this dark figure in the corner of my dorm room, and I would stare at it, but it would never move. Then all of a sudden, I would have an urge to throw up. This happened for a week straight. I never told anyone about this because I didn't want anyone to worry. One night, I ended up going to one of the girls' hometowns since it was Thanksgiving. And when I walked into the door, I noticed a cross statue. It was beige and made out of ceramic. I suddenly had an urge to touch it. So I did. Mind you, I am a very non-religious person, and for me to suddenly get an urge to touch a cross is very out of the ordinary. However, once I did that, I felt a million times better. Like a weight has been lifted off my chest. Ever since that day, I have never encountered that shadow figure again. Any thoughts as to why it attached itself to me? Freshman year of college, and I was visiting my friend, Catherine, at University of Georgia in Athens. She lived in Brumby at the time, a girls' dorm. Being underage, we spent our night smoking pot and goofing off in her room with her next-door neighbor and another girl, Danielle, who had also gone to high school with Catherine and I. The night was typical until Catherine's roommate joined us. She had just come back from the shower, they were communal, one for each floor, and said, "You guys have to come with me. There's a girl singing in the showers, and she has the most beautiful voice." Having nothing else to do, we obliged. And just as she said, there was the most lovely singing coming from one of the showers. There were 20 or so showers lined up on 2 walls, but only one of them had water running. Pertinent details. The shower curtains were such that they could not be closed even if pulled tightly as possible. There was always an inch or so uncovered on either side. They were almost see-through and also quite short, so you were going to see at least ankles if anyone was in there. Side note, what pervert designed these? There were also no speakers or ventilation system to be seen except for the drains on the floor. The point of all this detail is to tell you that although there was a single shower going with the curtain closed, there was no one in that shower stall or any of the other ones. We looked and looked, and all the while this girl is still singing beautifully, the voice reverberating from that one shower. Upon this realization, all of us looked at each other, utterly spooked. A moment later, Danielle darted out of the bathroom as fast as a champion sprinter. The rest of us followed her a few seconds later, though not at a run. Upon reaching the dorm room, we found Danielle sitting on the bed, shaking and chain-smoking with an ashtray in front of her. We pressed her as to why she ran. That was Tracy's voice. She always used to sing, she said. She's been following me around. I saw her at the creek the other day for just a second, and then she disappeared. I swear that was her voice. Tracy was in our junior high school class with us, but she died in a hiking accident the summer before our senior year. I was sitting in my dorm room with my roommate. We both had our headphones on, completely ignoring each other. My suite mate already left the dorm entirely. I was sitting at my desk working on homework and listening to music. Well, around 8 p.m. on January 13, 2014, I stared seeing a dark figure in my doorway leading to my common area, which is on my right side. I share with my 2 other roommates' suite mates, both are gone at this time. I saw this figure about 2 to 4 times over the course of about 30 minutes. About 10 minutes after I saw it, the last time in the doorway, I saw a black mass standing to my left. It blocked the view of my window and of my roommate. I knew it wasn't my eyes playing tricks on me, so I threw off my headphones and asked my roommate if he feels anyone else in the room. It was a dumb question because I have come to believe that he is a pathological liar, or at least enjoys telling stories that sounds really cool but are extremely fake. I sent a text to my friend that is in the other dorm hall. She thinks it could be the same spirit that was in her room. However, if it is the same spirit, then our rooms are not the first ones he has been in. In her room, he threw off all the things on her desk and knocked over the wall clock she had. It has been in 2 of my friends' rooms, both girls. In one's room, the spirit opened both of her windows and her door forcefully. In the other's room, while her roommate was asleep on top of her blankets, the spirit tucked her in, as in pulled the blankets over her sleeping body. She thanked them the next day, but only to find none of them touched her. What's going on? Is this spirit something to worry about? Are we all dealing with a different being? How can we stop this if it is a bad spirit without it becoming mad at us?